Well, good morning, everybody. Here's the plan for today. After we kind of review some of the recent precipitation and severe weather, we're going to walk through the trajectories of the flow right now. We're going to see how that evolves as we press our way into the month of August. I want to talk about what's going on in the tropics. We're going to look again at the model discrepancies between the GFS and the European on placing this next potential tropical cyclone after it comes out of the Bahamas. We'll stretch it out into a 2-week forecast, which continues to kind of favor some cooler air anchoring somewhere between the Great Lakes and the Hudson Bay, and that's going to drop a front in the midsection of the country, which is going to give us a very wet week 2 pattern. And then at the end of this, we're going to look out a bit longer term with the new European model update, and we will finish with some global information. So the first map you've been looking at for a while here is the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation. And I kind of want to break this map down into a few different regions. But first, there's clearly a trajectory in through this area where we've had repeated rounds of storms, some of which have been able to put down some pretty heavy rainfall. But oftentimes when I show you maps like this, your eye's drawn to the larger areas of these darker colors, and sometimes we miss out on noticing some of the very intense but much more locally heavy rainfall. So we can very quickly identify these corridors in through here, but I want to take you into the northeast. You may have seen lately, just kind of in the news, some of the flash flooding that's been happening in the northeast. If you take note, in this part of Vermont, there's a couple of places in through here that have recorded, well, this spot right in through here, 7.7 inches of rainfall in the last 72 hours. If I just zoom back out, take note of some of the rains that have come into Pennsylvania. This is one of our driest spots over the last several weeks, so it's good to get some rainfall into this area as well. But if we step back over to the north central U.S., again, that corridor in through here where places have picked up 3, 4, 5 inches of rain after repeated rounds of thunderstorms have kind of rolled over the top of the big ridge that's in the central United States. That's the same one that's been pumping all of that heat into parts of the south central plains, the central plains into parts of the mid-south. Well, these storms have just continued to cascade over the top of that, and they're going to do that again today. So we're going to watch them build into this area, and they'll spill right down into the southeast like they've been doing. So once again, this is really working against what had been in parts of June and July, the development of drought down here in the southeast, just getting kind of beat back by these rains rolling over the top of this ridge. Now, while we focus so much on where this heavier precipitation has been, it is important for us to watch very carefully who's been on the very dry side of things. We're going to come back to that in just a few moments. But I want to show you the severe weather progression. Let's blow this up a bit. This was on the 28th. We can already see these storms kind of running the periphery of this larger ridge that's sitting here temporarily in this section of the country. So here it is on the 28th. By the 29th, there we go. We can watch the storms kind of cascading over the top. And then yesterday's reports added another almost 300 reports of severe weather. And again, this corridor has just been lit up, not only with straight line wind damage, but also some hail reports, a single tornado report in northern Nebraska yesterday, and a lot of lightning. Just looking back over the last 24 hours or so, we approached nearly 500,000 cloud-to-ground lightning strikes, as you see here. And early this morning, we continue to watch storms. There's some off of the southeast coast. We have a storm that's moving through parts of South Dakota near Sturgis. But if we kind of zoom in a bit here, this is where our kind of active storm cluster is early this morning, rolling out of Iowa, right across the river here on the Mississippi into Illinois. So since we have all that lightning, we know there's ice in these storms. It's summer. There's ice in storms no matter what. But we've seen a lot of this grow into some pretty large hail. And over the last 3 days, just getting a glimpse here at our hail map, it's kind of followed that corridor. And there's been some very large hail in the Dakotas and several reports of large hail that have gone through parts of Iowa, Illinois, down to Kentucky, Tennessee. If we take just a quicker look, or a closer look, I should say, over the last 3 days, right again through that corridor, a few of these storms here putting down baseballs, and this is doing quite a bit of damage in that area. All right, if we take a look at the latest radar animation, this just goes back to yesterday and plays through this morning. Again, it's all about the trajectory of these storms and how much longer we're going to see them kind of spill over the top of this ridge. And you can see the isolated but very heavy rain moving through parts of the northeast as well. But I was watching this morning, just getting a feel for the way the pattern has been going, and I noticed something interesting in northern Nebraska. And I'm going to take you there for just a second and show you this amazing radar animation, which again goes back to last night and plays through the early morning hours this morning. What I found fascinating about it is, let's pause it. I was going to stop it and take you backward in time. Is look at the very complex interactions between these boundaries, and where the storms pop, where the boundaries kind of collide. And just again, you can see it right here. Look at this. See these two? And right on the northern edge, that's where the storm exploded. Another one popped here. Another one popped right there on that boundary. But then later, as these outflow kind of came through, the issue is that some of the outflow now is stabilized. It's a cold pool that ran into some upper level subsidence coming off the top of these storms. So later, this did not produce storms. It just kind of curled up into this really interesting boundary right there. And it'd be neat to be in this area. I imagine some of you watching are, to see the temperature fluctuations as that came through, because there's definitely some colder air in that. And then later on in the evening, look at the waves that set up on the outflow of this. These are gravity waves in the low levels of the atmosphere, rolling right back over the radar toward the west. And then as we get into the overnight hours and the inversion set up, we can see wind farms on the radar. Just fascinating radar animation until we get into early this morning, where some storms were coming out of Colorado into Nebraska here. But bigger picture, as the sun's trying to rise here this morning across the east, keeping an eye on this cluster of storms and what's coming back through the northern plains. And you'll see in a few moments as I show you the forecast that we're likely to get storms in these same corridors yet again today, before this whole system moves toward the Great Lakes and starts to shift out of the central United States. We'll come back to the western wildfire issues in just a few moments, but I wanted to show you first kind of the flow. So here it is today, and this is the shortwave that's running over the top of this ridge that's helping to initiate the storms that then cascade down in this direction. You can see the kind of mid-level steering flow taking them in this direction after they initiate here. But what's interesting is this is at about halfway through the atmosphere, up about 5 kilometers, halfway through the mass of the atmosphere. Let me be clear there. But if you come down closer to the surface, this is where the moisture is coming from. So there's our big Bermuda High sitting here. You got the flow coming around this, right through the Gulf of Mexico in, and curling up into a weaker low that's sitting here. And out ahead of this, what's color shaded is instability in the atmosphere, or CAPE, convective available potential energy. And this is, again, where the atmosphere is primed to make those storms. And as I was looking at this, I thought it'd be kind of fun to run some back trajectories on the flow for you here. So I picked right there where the storms were this morning. I know it's an odd projection because you see the Pacific. There's the United States, and here is like near the Quad Cities, right where the storms were just to the south of this morning. And if you want to know where the upper level flow was, this is jet stream level flow, and it started in China, and it picked up some flow that was north of Hawaii, and it got kind of pulled into California and rolled right over. Can you kind of see the trajectory right over that larger ridge as of late? That's where the upper level flow is coming from. The surface flow is here. Started on the southern side of the Bermuda High, came through the Caribbean into the kind of the western side of the Gulf of Mexico, and then rolled right through Texas and has delivered the moisture into that area. And that's just kind of the setup of this. So the upper levels are coming in like that, and the low levels are coming in like this, and everything is meeting in this area, and the storms are being pushed toward the south and east by the upper level flow, which is kind of the steering current of the current setup. So I just thought you might like to see that. But the reality is we're about to finish a month today, and we'll get a good look at these at the end of the week too, but I wanted to show you the July precipitation stats. So earlier, just to point out that rain that was moving through parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, especially into Pennsylvania, that just hit an area in the last couple of days that had been some of the driest so far in the month of July. And throughout the West, which is our other very large kind of dry area, we continue to see kind of prolific wildfire smoke. And I'll show you this again, kind of zoomed in here. We do have our large fire that's near Loveland continuing to spread smoke yesterday. And that smoke, of course, getting ingested in these large storms that were in parts of the Dakotas and Nebraska. There's the one in Nebraska we just talked about. But again, we come back into the West, into Oregon, Northern California, Central California. Just a lot of wildfire smoke here, despite some recent rains in the Northwest, which came in with this system that's generating these storms. So I just wanted to point that out again and kind of give you a perspective on where that smoke's going over the next couple of days. So like earlier in the month, we have the western wildfires, but unlike earlier in the month, we don't have a contribution coming from large fires in Alberta. And that's because the system last week went through there and dropped a lot of rainfall, putting out those fires for the most part. And now most of the smoke that you see here is left over from that, but the new smoke being generated is from the western U.S. wildfires, which continue to be very difficult to fight going forward. We'll take a closer look at the latest hazards in this area in just a few moments. Okay, severe weather today. This is what the Storm Prediction Center's put out early this morning. Let's get an update. They'll probably update this they always do it. It's about 30 to 40 minutes after I finish my videos. So remember to always go to the SPC website or go to my website. I make maps of their data, and you can have a good look at this. But they've identified this area kind of between, mostly in Iowa, but here in Nebraska and South Dakota. And I got to actually fly over to Omaha tonight. So hopefully I will, maybe I'll get to see some interesting stuff from the plane, but hopefully it also doesn't delay my flights. I have a talk to give here tomorrow morning. This is today. This is as we get into tomorrow. So again, they're still identifying this part of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. And then to finish this out on the 2nd, we're seeing a lot of the risk of thunderstorms moving into parts of the mid-Atlantic into the southeast, coming out of this side of the Ohio River Valley. Now, I've made a big case about this yesterday. The models are doing a terrible job understanding this convection. And if I just play this forward, it's a little better this morning at finding these storms, but it's about 6 a.m. And they, you saw a moment ago. Let's go back to it really quickly here. This is where these storms are early this morning. Sorry, let's get to the end here. That's where they are, coming out of central Iowa and already crossing the river. And the latest model run from the high-res NAM, which is one of these tabs, maybe it's this one, there we go, you can see how delayed the model was in developing. So these storms are already here. It's another day where we're not going to be able to rely on these short-term forecast models to predict where things are going to go, simply because they've been very poorly initialized. And they struggle. Every model struggles with convection. But we're just going to watch and see what the models are projecting. There's the low curling up. That's the shortwave trough. And again, I kind of went fast there, but this is through the day today on Wednesday, getting into Wednesday afternoon and evening. So watching out for some large storms to kind of roll through this area. More isolated heavy rain in the northeast, some in the southeast as well. But you're going to see the low curl up here on that shortwave in the overnight hours tonight into tomorrow morning, spreading some rain back through Illinois. It's going to go straight toward the Ohio River Valley. There it is. And that's how we expect things to kind of pan out as this kind of last wave of storms comes through over the next 2.5 days from the setup we explained earlier. And that short wave is this guy right here. So with all of that, let's go and have a look at the other side of this equation, which is in the tropics. And the latest update from the National Hurricane Center, this is their early morning update, the 147 update. 60% chance of developing. And we're still kind of watching the same discrepancies in the models. So I'll show you the GFS first. There's our Bermuda high. And as we go through Wednesday into Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And remember, by Saturday into Sunday, the Europeans already started to show the development of some sort of tropical system here that's going to be heading up toward the southeast coast. The GFS is much later in developing, and it wants to put it by next Tuesday, Wednesday, here into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, unlike yesterday's runs, where the GFS took this and rolled it right through Texas, which I told you, this is an outlier. It's not, it wasn't real. It was just a model run. The latest is giving us a little bit more reasonable scenario. Should whatever comes on the southern side of this Bermuda high get over Florida rather than staying over the Bahamas, I do think it has a chance of coming into this area, developing. The water's very warm here, and then hitting the southeast coast as maybe a tropical storm, or I don't know, but it's going to have a lot of moisture in it. But this is still 10 days away, and it'll be very clear that the uncertainty is very high on this, but we're watching just what the models are doing. But it takes that and then pulls it right through the middle part of Alabama and up along the Appalachian Mountains. So I'm just keeping an eye right here. All right, that's one model. That's the GFS, which we kind of made a case for yesterday. Let's now come in here and look at the new European. So we got the 0Z run queued up. There we go. So what is the European doing by Thursday into Friday and Saturday? Okay, this is the difference. There is the wave. Not as well established in the GFS, but it's there. And then as we get into Saturday night and Sunday, that low begins to form right here. And the new European model, which has the position of the Bermuda high much closer to this low, influencing its more northerly track, rather than leaving it way over here and giving it more of a southerly track. And the GFS just pulls it along the southeast coast. and eventually kicks it out into the open North Atlantic, and could be a very interesting system should it get on the northern side of the Bermuda High 10 days from now and head toward Europe. I mean, this could be huge for the end of the Olympics if it does come through there. We've already been watching a lot of extremely hot weather in Paris, followed by larger thunderstorms. So this could be an interesting finish that would be out there on the night of the 9th, getting toward Europe on the 10th. So we'll keep an eye on that one as well. All right, though, but pure probabilities, that's what the Europeans up to. And so you can see that the Europeans giving very low chance at seeing the same solution the GFS is. It's mostly keeping this system development here, and its strength is very much unknown. We just have to wait to see this late this week, by Saturday, what forms over the Bahamas. That's still what we're waiting on. So that's my latest I've got for you on this tropical system. Okay, let's walk through some of the models here. That's the next 7 days from the artificial intelligence forecast. This is the next 7 days from the national blend of models. You're seeing a lot of very similar kind of story as to what we showed earlier in the week. This is the WPC forecast for the next 7 days. Now we're getting into the European model. And the European model compared to the GFS is quite different. And I'm going to show you what these differences are, even though there are overall broader similarities. Take a look at the model differences in rainfall. European model, much wetter in this corridor, GFS wetter farther to the north. The European keeping the heaviest rains out more to open ocean with the tropical system, the GFS planting them now over parts of Florida and into the southeast. And those key differences are important for some major agriculturally productive areas, one in the southeast and the other around the Midwest, upper Midwest, and Great Lakes. So let's go ahead and compare the models side by side just to kind of see what they're up to. I'm going to take you back to the beginning of this run. So this is this afternoon, getting into this evening. And again, we're going to watch these complexes of storms roll through this area again today. And then we get into the day on Thursday through Friday morning. This is now getting into Saturday, where a lot of that wetter conditions, and the heavier rain and storms moves over into the Mid-Atlantic, the Southeast, the Appalachian Mountains, parts of the Northeast. That would be through Saturday night. And then take note, by Sunday, 1 o'clock, European models taking whatever this is here. The GFS has got the heavier rains over Florida. And as we watch a deeper trough build into the Hudson Bay, to the south of it is where we're going to keep an eye on these tropical systems. So take a look. By midweek next week, what's going on? The European has taken this thing and flung it way out to open ocean. The GFS has left it there. They both have, though, a frontal boundary in this area by midweek next week. And that's going to be not just interesting, but a very important front for determining the week 2 precipitation patterns. So I'll come back to that in a second. But first, let's just look at some probabilities. Knowing that the European model is the model that favors keeping whatever this tropical thing is out to open ocean, we see that over the next 10 days, this is our wettest corridor, with the driest air being anchored here. But there's been a shift in the newest 10-day forecast, and we've shrunk the area over which the excessive heat and dryness is going to be. Remember, in yesterday's forecast, it was more into Colorado, Nebraska, parts of Iowa, Missouri, even in South Dakota. It was much farther to the north. But the change in the upper level pattern is starting to kind of crimp this down into a smaller region. Now, this is still an important region in our cotton belt, corn and soybean belt. It's the Delta. It's the Red River Valley of the South. It's part of western Texas. I mean, this is key growing area that's going to still endure very hot and very dry conditions. But the change in the week 2 pattern is critical for all the areas surrounding it. Now, the west being as dry as you see here, this is typical of this time of year. We do have a little bit of a weaker southwest monsoonal signal right now as well. Just wanted to point out a couple of those things. But this change I'm talking about is here. We're going to play this relatively quickly. As we go through Friday into Saturday of this week, watch for the troughing in this area. This is Sunday into Monday, getting out there to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And while one tropical system in the artificial intelligence goes there and a second tropical wave moves out to open ocean here, the ridge moves in this direction, and it almost folds around with a broader trough sitting here. So our ridge kind of across the south opens up a bit into the southeast, but what this is going to do is going to set us up, 10 days from now, to having a pattern that has got a strong thermal boundary into here, some sort of front that's going to press down on that heat, leaving it much farther to the south while much cooler air comes into the north. And along that front, it's going to rain. Look at the week 2 pattern. The CPC went very aggressive across the country with better chances of rainfall. The European model and the GFS do look similar. This is what, though, I think the reality might be as we get out there into the week 2 pattern, which again is the 7th through the 14th of August. On the southern side of that trough, very stormy from Montana all the way down to New Mexico and then straight through the midsection of the country into the northeast. The heat and the dryness is getting pressed farther and farther to the south. And remember, farther to the south you go, the more you just get access to Gulf moisture anyway, just because it's summer. And you'll probably get storms to pop in this regardless of what the models are saying. But if we take a look at those temperatures today, widespread excessive heat warnings in parts of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, even here in the Delta, Mississippi, Tennessee, southern Illinois, very hot. We have the excessive heat watches in the west, the air quality issues in the west as well. And this is going to be the case for a little while here. Today's highs forecast by the National Digital Forecast Database. Getting into tomorrow, just another very hot one. Cool here because of storms, but look at the northwest taking this heat back on again. 104 again in parts of eastern Montana. Cool here because of storms. We then go into Saturday and Sunday. A lot of heat, but you know that by this weekend and early next week, there's the front setting up. That's where it's already going to be positioned by Tuesday. So we'll likely see a 20-25 degree swing in temperatures north-south on that frontal boundary, and that's what's setting us up with the wetter conditions. It's pretty clear in the day 5 through 10 where that contrast is going to be. To the south of it, very hot. To the west of it, very hot. But the reason why this deeper trough exists, look at all the heat to the west. That's where the ridge is building. Downstream trough will be the natural result, and it lasts probably 15 days. And you can see here that it's not just in the European. This is the next it's not just in the GFS, it's also in the European. That's your next 5 days. There's day 5 through 10 and day 10 through 15. Very similar forecast overall. So to finish this up, I just want to make a point again about some things we're watching. The pattern I thought we'd be seeing in August, I gave too much credit to the warm water here. It's now largely been these two epicenters of warm water that have set the height pattern up as we start the month, and that has taken the risk of leaving large ridges in the middle part of the country a bit more out of the picture. It's now taken them farther to the south and to the west at times. La Niña continues to be a factor here. And just to show you, our ocean temperatures have now dropped even more. So when I say it's a factor, this is just beginning to show itself as a likely contributor to this fall pattern. The dominant features are still here and here, but this is going to become a more important factor as we go forward. The newest European model shows where that epicenter of heat is, splitting the Pacific Ridge into two pieces, one here and one here. The northern edge of the Bermuda High is still strong. The southern edge, this is what we got to watch. Models continue to toss out lower pressure there, and also as a result, they're showing much wetter conditions here getting into the main development region. Zooming in on the United States and looking at the next 30 days in terms of precipitation as a as an anomaly. We're drier here. This certainly makes sense over the next 10 days, but a wetter corridor has been developing in the models and through this area, which we're going to continue to pay attention to. We will get a new update late today or maybe tomorrow morning from the Climate Prediction Center on their final August outlook, so I'll share with that tomorrow. But I'm going to finish up with a bit of an international update. Of all of the temperature pattern across the planet that I'm watching, this is by far the most intriguing to me. So coming out of the Sahara into the Sahel, north of the rainforest, this is an indication of very active convection. The MJO is planted here, which is an important thing to get the monsoonal flow going across Africa. And what we're going to be watching for as we get into August are these African easterly waves to emerge and move out into the open Atlantic Ocean. Now, it's still hot throughout Europe. We've got quite a bit of heat coming into South America as well, and you can see the western side of North America quite hot over the next 10 days. But take note of that. That is what is going to be the setup through August into September and October for tropical systems to be developing here. Again, southern France, dry, but up here around Paris and north, we still have these storms, and we're going to keep a close eye on our tropical system coming through that could initiate something maybe 10, 12 days from now over this part of the world. Another big surge of monsoonal rains coming into India's Ganges River Valley, wetter conditions north of the Shandong province, but getting into like Beijing, North China Plain, Manchurian Plain. And again, with this big low pressure center planted down here, off the coast of Australia, wetter conditions into parts of Australia that are key to the kind of success of their winter precipitation pattern. All right, that's what I got for you today. We'll talk tomorrow. See you in Omaha. Thanks.